So the big news recently is the Mueller Report came out of Washington. There's a whole lot of technical jargon in that report, and we're going to discuss some of those items today on Cyber Sentinel. Hello, this is Alan Adcock. I'm CEO of ASC Group here in Atlanta, Georgia. Today on Cyber Sentinel, we're going to be talking about the Mueller Report, big topic of news recently. There's a lot of technical jargon in that report, and we're going to go over some of those items in case you may not be familiar with what those are in this episode of Cyber Sentinel. If you have other questions that you want us to address on Cyber Sentinel, please reach out to us on social media at #CyberSentinel.
What is spearphishing?
So spearphishing appears in the Mueller Report 11 times. Spearphishing is a form of a phishing attack. Phishing is an email type of attack where people will send you a message that is designed to deceive you into clicking links or downloading attachments attached to that email. Spearphishing is a form of that attack that is highly targeted at you specifically. So they will monitor your email traffic. Everything you send via email is unencrypted across the internet, and anybody can read it. Just keep that in mind. And so in this case, the perpetrator is going to be watching your email traffic and seeing who you correspond with on a regular basis. And they're going to craft a message that looks like somebody who you usually communicate with and try to convince you to click on those links. In this case, in the Mueller Report, there were a whole bunch of people that clicked on spearphishing attacks. Once they did this, foreign actors, in this case, the Russian Army and cybersecurity operation guys and the GRU were the ones launching these spearphishing attacks. The GRU guys were able to gain access to a lot of the political operations and those networks running political offices, particularly at the DNC, where they were able to then monitor and all the communication inside the DNC during the election campaign and use that as a platform to launch spearphishing attacks at other election officials throughout that process. So this impacts corporate networks because obviously your corporate network can be targeted via spearphishing as well. You may not be in the middle of a presidential election, but oftentimes we see spearphishing attacks coming around when your company is in the news, when you have a new product you're trying to launch, or when you're in a bid competition with other companies trying to win a major project. Always be on the lookout for these type of spearphishing attacks, particularly when you're at a higher risk.
What is malware and how is it used?
So as we go through the Mueller Report, we've talked about spearphishing as the entry point onto those political networks. Once the GRU or the Russian intelligence and units in the Russian army were able to get into the networks, what did they do with that access? Well, they installed malware. In this case, they had some custom designed code that they were using. Once they deployed this software onto the network, it started logging all of the keyboard access and taking screenshots of the machines that it was installed on, which allowed them to spread laterally across the network pretty fast. They had infected over 30 machines at the Democratic National Committee, and eventually they were able to even access the login credentials of the IT administrator for the DNC. Once you've got that, you've got everything that you need to control that network. What the Mueller Report found is that they began these attacks back in March and April of 2016, and they were able to continue to monitor traffic inside that network for months leading up to the election. During that time, they were able to monitor all those internal communications, obviously at a very pivotal time in the election cycle. So the question here is, do you have hackers that have already penetrated your network? And if so, how long have they been there? Recent reports that we've seen on just commercial networks show that it's usually about 200 to 250 days between the time that a network is breached and the time that that breach is detected. That's a really long time for guys to be in your network, monitoring your communications and really mapping your network out so they can determine how to launch an attack that's going to be able to do the most damage to your corporate entity. So let's protect ourselves through numerous tools to make sure that we can detect these breaches before they've been there for a couple hundred days.
What is SQL Injections?
So the Mueller Report discusses something called SQL injection attacks in a couple of places in there. SQL stands for Structured Query Language. It's a type of database format that's used very commonly across computer networks. So an SQL injection attack is where the cyber attackers will craft a message, put it into an input field in your database in order to execute code that then that's going to allow them to export data from that database. So in this instance, with the elections coming up, the GRU, or Russian intelligence, used SQL injection attacks against, I believe it was 16 different state election committees. Those election organizations in those different states had databases that were exposed to the internet on their websites. The GRU crafted those inputs into those databases and attempted to crack those and gain access to those. The state of Illinois was breached, so they were able to go in and pull tax voter registration information out of the state of Illinois in an attempt to gain more and more information about the U.S. election and how they could implement influence over that election. So most companies today are running databases, running SQL internally. So we have to guard against these same types of attacks, the SQL injections. If you've got databases exposed through your website, you need to be aware of SQL injections and what that is, and different ways you can defend yourself against SQL injection attacks. The tools that are used for this, a lot of them are the same tools that's used for defending against other types of attacks. You know, our firewalls need to be configured to make sure that they're scanning for SQL injection attacks on those web servers. The web servers need to be locked down, and then your database itself. What kind of segmentation do you have in your database? Is critical data separated away from the rest of the data that you may want to expose to the internet? And then how are you monitoring that to make sure that you don't have a leak of that data coming out that's going to pose a breach of your confidential data that you can maintain on your clients and customers? So that's all we've got for this episode of Cyber Sentinel on the Mueller Report. If you've got questions about the Mueller Report or other cybersecurity issues that you want us to see us address on Cyber Sentinel, please find us on social media at #CyberSentinel.